Let's go to the Middle East now. I want to take you to Doha in Qatar, where I'm joined by Sky's business editor, Ross Greenwood, who flew there overnight. Ross, obviously Qatar's upping its operations out of Australia. They've got their new tie-up with Virgin. You flew in there overnight. No disruptions. I would have thought that flying into that part of the Middle East might be a little bit hairy at this time of year.
No, to be honest, it was pretty straightforward. It wasn't an issue. Quite clearly, the airspace in places nearby are going to be very restricted. Iran being one of those. To the west of me, Israel, of course, the airspace is there closed. But getting into here, no problems at all. And Qatar, sort of has obviously been this week named as the best airline in the world, which obviously they're trying to now promote. And so we're here having a look behind the scenes. And the key for that is really that they own now 25% of Virgin. Virgin is about to list on the Australian Stock Exchange, or relist, after it had previously gone broke. It's now back in a good state of health. And so from that point of view, it's trying to work out what that link-up will mean, given the fact that in the past, Qatar has really tried to get more flights into Australia, been knocked back by the Australian government, and whether this tie-up now really does mean it's going to create more international competition for Qantas along the way as well.
Explain the importance that Qatar has played. There was a piece in Jerusalem Times today. The important role they've played in these peace negotiations. I keep hearing that when the Americans fly in and the Israelis and even Hamas, a lot of those negotiations take place right where you are.
Yeah, they do, and historically that's been the case. In many cases, Qatar has seen itself to be really the sort of the independent state of the Middle East, and this is the reason why, as you point out, Hamas and Israel had many of their talks right here in Doha, and also then going back even further, it was where the Taliban and the United States also had their peace talks. Now, it's interesting just to note just one thing in regards to Iran and Israel, and that is the latest round of talks that took place were in Oman and not in Doha. Now, there might be good reasons for that, and that is that, number one, you've got a situation where Doha maintains relationships with Iran, but at the same time, it also hosts a US Air Force base right here on its own territory. So it becomes a fairly sensitive thing in terms of Middle Eastern politics as to where the talks will take place. But you do know that Qatar and Doha will play an integral part in any of the conversations that we will have, mainly because most of the dissident groups and many of the nation states have bases here in Doha, and this is often a place where they can have conversations without sort of igniting hostilities.
You sort of wonder, Ross, whether that airbase would be then used by the Americans if they did involve themselves in this conflict. But you probably would think that maybe that would be too sensitive. They might base their aircraft somewhere else, like in Germany.
Well, it could well be. And, of course, the long-range aircraft they might use in the future might not necessarily need the airbase here because, as you say, there would be political sensitivities. But there is no doubt that in terms of Iran, the airbase here would be one of the closest that America would have to Tehran. And so that's also something in terms of logistics you've got to be very conscious of. But for the time being, of course, Donald Trump has now said there's 2 weeks before any decision is made as to what the US's further involvement might be in this conflict. And so from that point of view, there is a bargaining chip there for Iran. And that's the reason why, again, even Doha might play a role in that, or Oman, in terms of where there might be talks in terms of the de-escalation of this conflict, and also then what the future of Iran's nuclear ambitions might be as well.
Just finally, a special edition of Business Sunday. I've been seeing the promos and I'm quite invested in this because I covered heavily the original floods in Lismore in 2021. You've gone and put a panel together to try and work out how these places can be made resistant to flood rather than just making the same mistakes time after time after again.
Look, I get frustrated, and I think a lot of people, and especially in these communities, get highly frustrated. The clean-up happens, the floods come back again. Or if it's not floods, there's bushfires going through places. And even though there are political promises that are made, quite often there is not enough action to make these communities resilient and resistant. Not just only, say, for example, levee banks or whatever it might be, or having people not building in vulnerable places. It's also about the fact that these places can't afford insurance, or just simply can't get it. And so that doesn't have a functioning community if you cannot get insurance. So that's the reason why we put this together, to really send a message to government, to basically say to government, you've got to act. The time to really sit there and have nice, kind words and hand out a few dollars in aid when people are flooded or have bushfires or natural disasters come through, cyclones in Queensland, is over. It really is a time when governments have got to act. It's going to cost, there's no doubt, but the fact of the matter is it is about securing regional Australia and many of these vulnerable communities if politicians simply do not act, and do not act quickly.
Good on you, Roscoe. Look after yourself. We'll catch up with you when you get back.